Lyra let out a heavy sigh as she folded the last of the laundry in their cramped apartment. It had been a tough day at school, and all she longed for was a peaceful evening. Reaching for Finnegan's jacket to toss it in the wash, her hand stilled when she noticed something, a crumpled envelope sticking out of the pocket. Driven by curiosity, she pulled it out and flattened the creases. A knot tightened in her stomach. The bold red letters at the top read eviction notice, and it hit her like a blow. The letter explained that they were 3 months behind on rent. How could this be? She had entrusted Finnegan with managing the bills while she took care of the home. Finnegan, she called, her voice trembling with unease, not anger, but fear. Finnegan appeared in the doorway, his usual smile fading as he saw what she was holding. What's this? Lyra asked, her voice wavering. Finnegan hesitated nervously, rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign that something was wrong. I can explain, he started, but Lyra interrupted. Explain what? That we're about to lose our home, that you've been keeping this from me for months. Stepping forward, Finnegan tried to take the notice from her, but she pulled it out of his reach. Lyra, listen, he said, his voice softening. It's not what you think. I had to help Copy. She needed money for the kids' school fees, and then the car broke down. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. You gave our rent money to your sister? She's been struggling since her husband passed. Finnegan defended himself. I couldn't just turn my back on her. Lyra's frustration boiled over. So you decided to let us struggle instead? She waved the notice in front of his face. Did you really think I wouldn't find out, or were you planning to wait until we were living on the streets? Finnegan reached for her hands, but she pulled away sharply. I was going to fix it, he said, his voice quieter now. I've been working extra hours. I thought I could catch up before it got this far. With what money? Finnegan. Lyra's voice rose with each word. Our savings are gone, aren't they? His silence was all the confirmation she needed. Lyra turned away, her mind reeling. Their home, the life they'd built, it all felt like a lie, and for what so Copy could keep up appearances. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from Keepy. Can't wait for family dinner tomorrow. Love you both. The irony made Lyra laugh bitterly. Copy, who was supposedly struggling, had time to plan dinners while they were facing eviction. I can fix this, Finnegan pleaded again, his voice more desperate now. I just need more time. Lyra stared at him, seeing the man she had married 5 years ago, now a stranger. You've made your choice, Finnegan, she said coldly, and it wasn't me. As Finnegan stood frozen in the doorway, Lyra turned back to the laundry. She didn't know how they would get through this, but one thing was certain: their trust had been broken beyond repair. The next morning, Lyra woke up early. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, glaring at her like a bad omen. She stared at it as she sipped her coffee, her thoughts in turmoil. How had they reached this point? Had she been so blind to Finnegan's actions, so trusting that she didn't notice the warning signs? Finnegan was still asleep, or at least pretending to be. Lyra didn't care. She needed space. Grabbing her bag, she left the apartment, letting the door slam behind her. Her destination was clear. She needed to talk to Tina. Tina's office was in a bustling part of downtown Portland. Lyra had barely texted her friend a summary of the situation before Tina called back, her tone sharp and concerned. Get here now, she had said. When Lyra arrived, Tina was waiting outside, leaning against the building with 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. This better be a joke, Tina said, handing one to Lyra as they started walking. I wish it was. Lyra muttered. She explained everything as they strolled along the park path nearby. The eviction notice, the drained savings, Finnegan's excuses, and Copy's constant demands. Tina listened silently, her expression darkening with each word. When Lyra finished, Tina stopped walking and faced her. You're telling me Finnegan gave your savings to his sister without telling you while You're working yourself to the bone to keep things afloat. Yes, Lyra, replied her voice barely above a whisper. Saying it out loud made the betrayal cut even deeper. Tina sighed, shaking her head. This isn't just a bad decision, Lyra, it's a betrayal. He didn't even give you a chance to weigh in, he just took from you. Lyra felt her throat tighten. I keep asking myself why he
didn't trust me enough to tell me I
could have helped figure something out. Because he didn't want to hear no, Tina said bluntly. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, especially when he's trying to please. Keepy. The mention of Keepy made Lyra's blood boil. She's been living with us for months, Tina. Months. I thought she was trying to get back on her feet, but now it feels like she's just misusing us and Finnegan's wedding. Her Tina said you need to figure out where your line is. Lyra, what's the limit before you have enough? Lyra didn't answer. She wasn't sure where her limit was yet, but she knew she was close. That evening, Lyra returned home to find Cappy sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone. The television blared a reality show. The background and the faint smell of popcorn lingered in the air. Her two young kids were running around the small living room, leaving toys scattered everywhere. Lyra, Cappy said brightly, as if nothing was wrong. Dinner's almost ready. Hope you don't mind I used that fancy pasta you bought last week. The kids were craving something special. Lyra clenched her jaw. Fancy pasta, the same pasta she and Finnegan had decided to save for a rare date night. She forced a smile. No problem, she said, her voice tight. As Cappy turned her attention back to her phone, Lyra walked into the kitchen. Finnegan was there, stirring something on the stove. He looked up as she entered, guilt written across his face. Lyra, he began, but she cut him off. Not now, she replied sharply. She had no energy left for another argument. Instead, she grabbed a glass of water and walked out, deliberately ignoring the tense atmosphere that clung to the room. The following day, Lyra sat in her classroom during her lunch break, staring at her phone. A notification from Cap's Instagram popped up. Despite her better judgment, Lyra opened it. The post showed Cap's kids in brand new clothes holding shopping bags from a high-end mall. The caption read, "Fresh start, new beginnings." So blessed. Lyra's stomach churned. How could Cappy flaunt such extravagant purchase when they were about to lose their home? Her frustration boiled over, and she quickly texted Tina, "Wine my place tonight." Tina arrived later carrying 2 bottles of red, her face solemn as Lyra vented about the situation. She couldn't hold back her anger. She's using Instagram to boast about her life while draining ours, and Finnegan, he just stands by and does nothing. Then stop letting him, Tina said firmly, pouring Lyra a generous glass of wine. You don't owe them anything, Lyra. If they're going to treat you like a doormat, it's time to show them the door. Lyra gazed at the swirling wine in her glass. Tina's words made sense, but it wasn't that simple. She had loved Finnegan, trusted him. Letting go of everything they had built together wasn't a decision she could make lightly. The family dinner the following evening unfolded just as Lyra had feared, and more. Linda arrived early, casserole dish in hand, immediately taking charge of the table as if it were her own home. Finnegan hovered near her, hanging on every word. Cappy played the part of the grieving widow while her kids remained the focus of attention. As always, Lyra sat mostly in silence, her appetite gone. She listened as Linda praised Finnegan for being such a good brother and criticized Lyra for not being more understanding of family struggles. Finally unable to take it anymore, Lyra set her fork down with a sharp clink and fixed her gaze on Cappy. Do you want to tell everyone the truth, or should I? The room fell silent. Cappy blinked, feigning innocence. What do you mean? I mean the truth about where the money really went. The shopping, the trips, the fancy meals. Lyra's voice was steady, but the anger simmered beneath the money. Finnegan took
From me to give to you, Linda gasped.
Clutching her chest, Finnegan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor caps. Expression hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Lyra pulled her phone from her pocket and opened the screenshots she had saved of Kip's Instagram posts. She slid the phone across the table for everyone to see, don't you, because this doesn't look like someone who's struggling. Yapi glanced at the screen, her face pale. I was going to pay it back, she stammered, when after we were homeless. Lyra demanded. You've been lying to us this whole time. Copy, using your kids as an excuse to live off of us while we fall apart. Linda tried to interject, but Lyra held up a hand. No, Linda, you don't get to lecture me about family loyalty when your daughter has been stealing from me. The table fell into silence. Lyra stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done, she said, her voice firm. He began, but she cut him off. Not now, she replied sharply. She had no energy left for another argument. Instead, she grabbed a glass of water and walked out, deliberately ignoring the tense atmosphere that clung to the room. The following day, Lyra sat in her classroom during her lunch break, staring at her phone. A notification from Cap's Instagram popped up. Despite her better judgment, Lyra opened it. The post showed Cap's kids in brand new clothes holding shopping bags from a high-end mall. The caption read, "Fresh start, new beginnings." So blessed. Lyra's stomach churned. How could Copy flaunt such extravagant purchase when they were about to lose their home? Her frustration boiled over, and she quickly texted Tina, "Wine my place tonight." Tina arrived later carrying 2 bottles of red, her face solemn as Lyra vented about the situation. She couldn't hold back her anger. She's using Instagram to boast about her life while draining ours, and Finnegan, he just stands by and does nothing. Then stop letting him, Tina said firmly, pouring Lyra a generous glass of wine. You don't owe them anything, Lyra. If they're going to treat you like a doormat, it's time to show them the door. Lyra gazed at the swirling wine in her glass. Tina's words made sense, but it wasn't that simple. She had loved Finnegan, trusted him. Letting go of everything they had built together wasn't a decision she could make lightly. The family dinner the following evening unfolded just as Lyra had feared, and more. Linda arrived early, casserole dish in hand, immediately taking charge of the table as if it were her own home. Finnegan hovered near her, hanging on every word. Copy played the part of the grieving widow while her kids remained the focus of attention. As always, Lyra sat mostly in silence, her appetite gone. She listened as Linda praised Finnegan for being such a good brother and criticized Lyra for not being more understanding of family struggles. Finally unable to take it anymore, Lyra set her fork down with a sharp clink and fixed her gaze on Copy. Do you want to tell everyone the truth, or should I? The room fell silent. Copy blinked, feigning innocence. What do you mean? I mean the truth about where the money really went. The shopping, the trips, the fancy meals. Lyra's voice was steady, but the anger simmered beneath. The money Finnegan took
From me to give to you, Linda gasped.
Clutching her chest, Finnegan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor caps. Expression hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Lyra pulled her phone from her pocket and opened the screenshots she had saved of Kip's Instagram posts. She slid the phone across the table for everyone to see, don't you, because this doesn't look like someone who's struggling. Yapi glanced at the screen, her face pale. I was going to pay it back, she stammered, when after we were homeless. Lyra demanded. You've been lying to us this whole time. Copy, using your kids as an excuse to live off of us while we fall apart. Linda tried to interject, but Lyra held up a hand. No, Linda, you don't get to lecture me about family loyalty when your daughter has been stealing from me. The table fell into silence. Lyra stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done, she said, her voice firm. Lyra interrupted, her voice sharp with hurt. What about us do you think this hasn't been hard for me too? I was your partner. You were supposed to trust me, but instead you chose to betray me. I didn't see it that way, Finnegan murmured. I thought I was doing the right thing for who? Lyra asked, her eyes narrowing. Because it sure wasn't for us. Finnegan dropped his gaze to his hands, his shoulders sagging. You're right, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I let my guilt over cop situation cloud my judgment. I put her needs above yours, above ours, and I'm sorry. Lyra shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Sorry doesn't fix this, Finnegan. Sorry doesn't pay the rent or undo the damage you've done. I know, he said quietly, but I want to make it right. I'm starting therapy. I've been talking to my boss about picking up extra work to pay back what I took. I'm trying. Lyra studied his face, searching for the man she had once trusted. Without question, she could see the regret in his eyes, but regret alone wasn't enough. Trust once broken wasn't easily restored. I appreciate that you're trying, she said, finally, her voice flat, but I don't know if I can forgive you for this. Finnegan nodded slowly, as though he had anticipated her response. I understand, but I'm not giving up on us. Lyra, not yet. Lyra didn't reply. She wasn't sure what to say. A part of her wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that they could rebuild what had been lost. But another part, the part that had been betrayed, wasn't ready to let go of her anger. Later that evening, Lyra returned to the apartment for the first time in days. Finnegan wasn't home, but Copy was. She was sitting on the couch, her kids playing quietly on the floor, when Lyra walked in. Copy looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. Lyra, she said hesitantly, can we talk? Lyra crossed her arms, leaning against the door frame. What is there to talk about? Copy, you've already said enough with your actions. Copy stood, wringing her hands nervously. I know I've messed up. I know I've taken advantage of you and Finnegan, and I'm sorry. Are you? Lyra asked, her voice cold, because it didn't seem like you were sorry when you were posting pictures of your shopping trips and new clothes while we were struggling to keep a roof over our heads. Copy winced. I was trying to keep up appearances after Tom died. I didn't know how to handle everything, the bills, the kids, the loneliness. It all felt like too much, so I made bad choices that hurt other people. Lyra said, do you even realize the position you've put us in? I do now, Copy said, her voice cracking. I've been selfish, and I see that now. I want to make things right. Lyra, I've already started looking for a job, and I've talked to Finnegan about moving out as soon as I can. Lyra stared at her, unsure whether to believe her words. Copy had always been good at playing the victim, but this time there was something different in her tone, something genuine. We'll see, Lyra said. Finally, actions speak louder than words. Copy, if you really want to make things show me. Copy nodded, tears streaming down her face. I will. I promise. That night, Lyra sat alone in the apartment, her mind racing. The confrontation with Copy had left her feeling drained, but also strangely hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, things could change, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Promises were easy to make, but much harder to keep. As she stared out the window at the city lights, Lyra realized that no matter what happened, she needed to prioritize herself. For once, she couldn't keep sacrificing her happiness and stability for others. It was time to take control of her own life. With a renewed sense of determination, Lyra picked up her phone and started making a plan. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: she wasn't going to let anyone else dictate her path ever again. Lyra sat in the corner booth of a small coffee shop in downtown Portland, the same one she had visited countless times during her marriage to Finnegan. This time, though, the visit felt different. She had requested to meet him here, not to rekindle anything, but to find out what had been left unresolved. Finnegan arrived a few minutes late, his shoulders slightly hunched and his expression weary. He spotted Lyra and gave her a small, hesitant wave before approaching the table. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from her. Lyra nodded, folding her hands on the table. Hey, the silence between them was heavy. For a moment Lyra simply studied him. Finnegan looked thinner, older, as if the weight of everything had finally settled on him. It wasn't anger she felt toward him anymore, just a quiet sadness. "I wanted to meet to talk about what happens next," Lyra said, finally, her voice steady yet firm. "Is it's time to make decisions?" Finnegan nodded, his gaze dropping to his coffee cup. "I get it. I've been thinking about it too. I've been staying at a motel for now, but I found a more permanent roommate situation." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "A roommate?" "Yeah," Finnegan replied softly. "I need to figure out who I am without everything else, without Mom's influence, without Copy relying on me. I've started therapy too." "That's a good step," Lyra remarked. Surprised by his openness, Finnegan met her gaze for the first time during their conversation. "I know I can't undo what I've done, Lyra," he said quietly. "I just want you to know I'm sorry for everything, breaking your trust, not putting you first, for all of it." Lyra nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Finnegan, but this isn't just about apologies, it's about actions. I need to move forward, and I can't do that if I'm still tangled up in this mess." Finnegan turned away, his jaw tightening. "Does that mean you're filing for divorce?" he asked, his voice faltering. Lyra exhaled deeply, knowing this was the decision she had to make. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "It's what's best for both of us. We need to start over separately." Finnegan nodded, his face filled with a mixture of pain and acceptance. "I understand. I don't want to hold you back anymore." For the first time in months, Lyra felt a slight weight lift from her shoulders. Though painful, the decision felt like the right one. A week later, Lyra was back in the apartment packing up her things. Finnegan had already moved out, leaving her space to pack in peace. Kaipi and her children had also left, staying with Linda temporarily. The silence in the apartment was both unsettling and comforting. As Lyra sorted through the kitchen drawers, she discovered an envelope addressed to her. The handwriting was unmistakably Cope's. She opened it carefully, half expecting another apology. Instead, inside was a check and a short note. "Lyra, I know this doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. I've been working and saving, and I'm going to pay back every cent I owe you. Thank you for being the one who forced me to wake up. You didn't have to, but you did. I'll never forget it." Copy. Lyra stared at the checker, emotions mixed, surprised and disbelieving. It wasn't a large amount, but it was something tangible, an attempt to repair the damage. Months passed, and Lyra moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town, closer to her school. The space was modest but cozy, flooded with sunlight and filled with the promise of new beginnings. She focused on herself for the first time in years, rediscovering hobbies she once enjoyed like painting and hiking. Tina remained a steadfast support, and their friendship grew even stronger. One evening, as Lyra sat on her balcony sketching the city's skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Tina. "You're going to want to see this check." Caps. Instagram. Lyra hesitated before opening the app. Keepy had been quiet on social media for months, but this post showed her kids at a park grinning widely as they played. The caption read, "Starting fresh, new job, new outlook, grateful for second chances." Lyra stared at the screen, a small smile pulling at her lips. Maybe, just maybe, Copy was beginning to turn things around. A year after everything had fallen apart, Lyra found herself sitting in the same coffee shop, but this time for a different reason. She was meeting Tina to celebrate a milestone, her promotion to department head at her school. As she sipped her coffee, Lyra reflected on how far she had come. The sting of betrayal had lessened, replaced by a quiet, steady strength. She no longer felt defined by the mistakes of others. She had rebuilt her life on her own. Terms here's to starting over, Tina said. Raising her mug in a toast, Lyra clinked. Her mug against Tina's, a genuine smile. Lighting her face, here's to growth outside the coffee shop. The city hummed with life. Lyra watched as people hurried by, each carrying their own stories of struggle and resilience. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, no longer burdened by the weight of betrayal. She was free, ready to embrace a future she had created with her own strength and determination.